Ina mana, ina reo, tēnā koutou katoa, no ototahi ahau, he kai huri ma tauronga taku mahi, ko Kituku ingoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Hey everyone, I am Kit, I'm come from here in Otautahi, Christchurch, and my work is to turn knowledge around. So as was mentioned, I work with strategy, diversity, culture, and while I love what I do, this isn't what I always wanted to do when I was a little kid. So when I was about 5, I was asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said, I want to be a father. My family was a little different, but in a good way. When dining out at a restaurant, if I showed up like this, then I visited the women's and then the men's bathrooms. Nothing was said, no judgment, just a loving smile. I was so curious, what was in the men's toilets? Why do we have separate ones? Which one did I belong in? Maybe if I spent some time in each toilet, I'd figure out where I belonged. I grew up watching Magnum PI and the Fonz, and I kind of modelled myself on these suave, confident guys. I kind of thought I'd grow up to be like them. When I was 6 years old, explaining to a hairdresser how I wanted to look, he said, "But you don't want to look like a boy." That was maybe the first time an adult had given me any sense that I had to make a decision, and the decision that I should be making was girl. While I got none of this messaging at home, the message was to be reaffirmed over and over as the years went on, as kids in the playground would approach me and say, "Ooh, are you a boy or a girl?" I got the message that if they couldn't figure out which box to put me in, I was to blame for their discomfort. It made me the disgusting one for making them feel that way. Ooh. So I labelled myself a girl. One of my teachers in primary school took my mother aside and told her that I had gender identification problems. Lucky for me, my mother rolled her eyes and laughed it off. Though my teacher was right, I did have a problem picking one of only 2 genders. By high school, I figured out I wasn't going to become a Fonz. I knew the choice I should make in order to make other people feel comfortable, so I decided to grow my hair out and fit in with life at an all-girls school. I started dating boys in my early teens, and I continued this kind of awkward dance until I left high school. But I never felt like I was doing it right. In my head, boys wanted this kind of feminine, girly girl who wore dresses and she crossed her legs. I didn't do any of this stuff, and I felt awkward, like I was failing at being a girl. But I muddled along the way that you do when you're a teenager. When I left high school, I went straight out and I cut my hair off. Not long after this, I had the genius idea to start dating women, and I never looked back from this. I'd assumed I was like everyone else on TV, in the movies, around me, in the media, straight. It was such a relief. I felt no pressure to act like a girl anymore. So I took on this new label, lesbian. But I never really liked it. Perhaps because it kind of presumes that I'm a woman to start with. Not that I identify as a man, I just don't feel what either describes me. I generally said I date women, so I didn't have to assign a gender to myself. Until the term non-binary entered the scene. This was huge for me. Suddenly a label that described me was showing up all over the place. Non-binary is actually kind of a funny label because it's really describing what I'm not. But why does it even matter what I am? Like, in what situations would this matter? I once fell off my mountain bike and I cut my chin open, and the younger female doctor looked at me, chatted for a couple of minutes about what had happened, and then looked at me and said, "Do you have any tenderness in your testicles?" Now, I wish I'd thought of a really epic next line to give her, but I was just like, I don't have any testicles. This is one time where my biological sex actually meant she was going to get nowhere helping me with sore testicles. I was once greeted in the gas station with, "Hello, sir. I mean, ma'am. I mean, sir. I mean, ma'am. This need to gender people is so bizarre. Imagine if we classified people as like tall people and short people. "Excuse me, tall person," we might say, or "Do you think that person sitting over there is tall or short?" Those medium height people would be freaking out about which one they're going to be. Or maybe if we lived in a society where the dominant narrative was that tall people married short people. Ew, 2 tall people fell in love. It's disgusting. It happened a few times when my son was in primary school and I'd been in the classroom gluing sparkles onto paper mache balloons. One of their classmates would approach me and say, "Are you Cosmo's mum or Cosmo's dad?" And I'd say, "Oh, I'm a little bit of both." They'd look at me for a few seconds and go, "Oh, okay," and they'd walk away seemingly satisfied. Kids don't seem to have an issue with it until they're taught to. Over the years, I've had a number of situations in public toilets where I get a shocked look, somebody leaves in a huff, or says something like, "Excuse me, this is the women's." Pro tip, assume that people know which bathroom they're in. Now, I've been super lucky and privileged in my life. I've never been abused, attacked, excluded, but I still feel a sense of anxiety when using public toilets because of these situations. And I breathe a sigh of relief when I see signs like this. But not everyone's as lucky as me. There are thousands of people out there struggling to fit in, getting scared about what might happen if they enter either toilet, accused or abused, in both the men's or the women's. A few years ago, my tactic for public toilets was to remove my jacket, stick out my chest so that fearful women in the toilets would see my breasts and think twice before accusing me. A couple of years ago, I decided to get top surgery to remove my breasts altogether. For 40 years, every shirt I put on looked wrong. Every time I looked in the mirror, I expected to see a flat, masculine chest. And it was always confusing and disappointing. This is called gender dysphoria. The anxiety, confusion, and discomfort you feel when your biological sex doesn't match the gender that you inwardly experience. After a lifetime of feeling awkward about my chest, I now feel awesome and free every day because my body reflects more of how I feel on the inside. But now I have to rely on just my smile in public bathrooms. I can't get away with using my chest. So we've come a long way since I was a kid watching TV. There's so much more representation, though still a long way to go. Seeing somebody like you in a movie, presenting the news, or running a country can be a huge relief for people struggling to know if and where they fit in. Knowing there are others out there who also don't fit into this binary has also given me a sense of belonging and allowed me to move with more confidence through the world. So you're probably familiar with terms like homosexual and gay and bisexual. Let's go over some others that aren't always so well known. Pansexual is somebody that is attracted to any gender, including trans, intersex, and non-binary folks. Intersex describes a variety of situations in which a person is born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't fit into the boxes of male or female. Those who identify as gender fluid feel their gender isn't fixed, but it fluctuates. Non-binary folks don't identify with the binary, either man or woman, concept of gender. Some non-binary people use the term genderqueer. Non-binary, genderqueer, or gender fluid folks could use any pronouns: he, him, she, her, they, them, sie, ze, or something else. There's plenty out there. There's no rules when it comes to identity, so it's always best to ask somebody what pronouns they use rather than to assume. Transgender, once known as transsexual, which is not a term we use anymore, refers to somebody whose gender identity doesn't match the biological body they were born in. A trans man is a man who was born with a biologically female body. Most trans men like to be referred to as a man, the way a one-armed man would prefer to be referred to as a man, rather than a one-armed man. Others like trans men as they feel their transition is part of their identity. A trans woman is a woman who was born with a biologically male body. She may or may not have had gender-affirming surgeries or be taking hormones. Whether she is or not does not mean she identifies any more or less as a woman. Cisgender describes somebody whose body matches the gender that they identify with. Why I chose Marge Simpson, I have no idea. We don't even know, unless we ask, right? The genderbreed person is an awesome infographic to outline what often gets confused or conflated: gender identity, gender expression, biological sex, and attraction. It's important to remember that somebody can identify as male and have a feminine gender expression, and this does not mean that you automatically know their biological sex or who they're attracted to. Like Mark Bryan, a 62-year-old heterosexual cisgender robotics engineer from Berlin, who 5 years ago started wearing stilettos and skirts to work simply because he likes to dress like that. He thinks that clothes should not have a gender. I signed up to an app the other day and the default pronoun was they. This makes sense to me. It's inclusive of everyone, feels like the future, feels good. Many languages around the world already use they them pronouns as a sign of respect. I switched a couple of years ago to they him. Neither he nor she really felt right to me. Plus, I felt it was important to advocate for those who come after me who might not have as much privilege or support as I've had. Even though it may seem new, we do use they them pronouns in our everyday language. Somebody leaves their phone at the bar, maybe they'll come back for it, I'll just leave it here for them. Initially though, it does take a little bit of getting used to. For some folks, using their chosen pronouns deeply supports their sense of belonging, and using someone's pronouns as a way to say, I see you, or I validate you, or just, you're okay. Aotearoa has the highest youth suicide rate in the world, more than twice the OECD average. Young gay or bisexual people in New Zealand are 4 times more likely to have attempted suicide, with young transgender people 5 times more likely. 56% of non-binary people aged 15 and over reported having seriously considered suicide in the last 12 months. 67% of people with alternative gender identities have experienced discrimination at some point, 44% in the last 12 months. 57% did not disclose being trans or non-binary at work for fear of discrimination, and those who have experienced discrimination were twice as likely to have attempted suicide in the last year. Only 57% said that their family or whānau supported them. For those whose families did, were almost half as likely to have attempted suicide in the last 12 months. So let's talk about allyship. Allyship is not an identity. It's an ongoing process of building relationships based on trust, consistency, accountability with marginalised people or groups. Having privilege does not mean that you've had an easy life, that you haven't struggled or had to work hard, but it does mean that you have an unearned advantage that some, but not all people have. So how are some ways that you can be an ally? You can use inclusive language with those around you. You can replace ladies and gentlemen with folks or friends, his and hers with theirs. At work, you could look at your organisation's hiring process, how you represent gender stereotypes in your marketing material. You could offer unisex bathrooms. You could update your website form to include non-binary options, or if you're the organiser of the Brit Awards, you could remove the separate male and female prizes and create a gender-neutral awards category. They're small things, but they do make a difference, and they can begin to shift the dial on those statistics. Thanks, friends. If you've got any questions, this is the time. Hairy questions, awkward questions you've wondered about. Not all queer folk are available to answer your questions, but now is your moment if there's anything weird that you want to get off your chest.
A bit of a controversial. How do you feel about transgender people in sports? And I have no bias or anything. I just want to know.
What do you think is the appropriate response when someone assumes your gender?
So just a question for those of you here is, what is the appropriate response if somebody assumes my gender and gets it wrong?
Or what is your response?
What is my response? Yeah, I will generally, personally, I let it go the first time and then the second time I'll just gently correct them. Yep. it's a huge journey. Like nobody was taught this stuff in primary school. I mean, maybe kids in primary school now, fingers crossed, are being taught this stuff, but certainly I wasn't. So I don't expect people out there to know or understand. So I certainly don't feel any animosity, but more if they're open to learn, then I'd love to share.
You first. I was just going to ask if you know about different cultures that have language that is more non-binary, if there's like differences like in suicide rates or like actual marked like better progress in those languages that are more neutral.
Yeah, I would love to know the answer.
Very specific.
No, I don't. I mean, I know that we're the worst, so nobody can be as good as we are in New Zealand. And I know that there are some cultures that kind of use non-gendered pronouns as a rule, but whether they have particularly awesome stats, I'm not sure. That's a great research thing. If anyone's looking for a research topic.
It's sort of a big question, but I'll throw it out there. What advice would you give to teachers working, for example, in high school, with like gender questioning students in their class? Do you have any thoughts on what needs to happen in high school students and help these people out?
Yeah, that is a tough one. I mean, I think being inclusive, like it's tough with pronouns because if you're thinking that you maybe want to switch to the other side or you're somewhere in the middle, to put a line in the sand and say that you want to change pronouns is a scary thing to do, particularly in a high school environment. And, teenagers are so experimental with their identity, and so there is no like, this is it. I think just educating teachers and understanding that kids are exploratory and that it's okay to try different things. Because I have a teenager myself who's on this journey, that I know that it can also be, maybe this is wrong to say, but tiresome at times with the, like, I'm changing my name for the 37th time, and I'm fluid, so I'm she today and him tomorrow, and you should keep up with it. Like, what's wrong with you? You're being so, unacceptable. So, be kind to yourself, but just, educate yourself, be inclusive. Again, like girls and boys, no need for that. Certainly not like all the boys over here and all the girls over here, let's have 2 different teams. Like anything that's sort of gender related, like there's no place for it. And if there aren't unisex bathrooms in the school, like definitely it's tough with the uniforms as well. I know there's lots of schools that are making huge progress in that space. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, friends.